Welcome, sleepless spirit. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to guide you gently into the shadows of slumber, where dreams take over and worries fade away. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more bedtime tales, whispered just for you. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it as you listen tonight? And if there's a story you've been longing to hear, something spooky, something comforting, tell me. I'm always listening. Now, tuck yourself in. Let the darkness wrap around you like a warm blanket. It's time to let go and drift into the story. I was never the type of person who was easily frightened. I grew up outside of Atlanta in a bustling, noisy area. Barking dogs, honking cars, and inquisitive neighbors. There was always someone nearby. There wasn't much privacy. I didn't mind, for the most part. However, everything slowed considerably after I relocated to Nashville for graduate school. I discovered that I was yearning for calmer, more grounded weekends. The journey resulted from that. On a hot weekend in the South in late July, the air seemed like soup, and your shirt was sticking to your back before you could get to the car. Amelia, a friend of mine, recently turned 26. We reasoned that it was the ideal justification for leaving the city. Me, Amelia, Lauren, Jess, and Kat are the only 5 of us. We all stayed close even though we dispersed after meeting in college. Kat recommended that we book an Airbnb in a peaceful location, perhaps the mountains. She discovered this location outside the northern Georgian village of Ellings Creek. Cozy cabin with picturesque views, ideal for group getaways. The listing stated. A couple of the images showed a big wraparound porch, a 2-story wooden cabin, and pine trees so tall they engulfed the sky. With the exception of a few odd evaluations that claimed the host checked in frequently, it got dozens of 5-star reviews. We dismissed it with laughter. Southern hospitality. Our reservation was for Friday through Sunday. It took slightly more than 4 hours to drive from Nashville. Coolers, snacks, blankets, and enough wine to tip over a small hamlet were all in Amelia's Jeep. It was getting close to sunset by the time we arrived at the dirt road that led to the cabin. An additional half-mile, adds Lauren, squinting at the GPS. However, this doesn't seem correct. From the rear seat, Kat remarked, I think it's one of those roads that looks like it leads nowhere, but it doesn't, through dense trees that created long, finger-like shadows on the gravel. The route turned and thinned. I felt a knot in my stomach, but I kept quiet. The cabin was finally seen as the trees parted. It appeared just like the pictures, if not more so. It was rustic yet cozy, with a large front porch, a porch swing, and that wonderful wood glow. From a smaller structure nestled roughly 50 feet behind the main house, a man emerged. As we pulled up, he waved, whispering, That must be the host, Jess said. Tall, with salt and pepper hair and a well-groomed beard. He appeared to be in his early 50s. His eyes wrinkled as he smiled, and he was dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt. He yelled, Evening, ladies. Hello, I'm Franklin, and I oversee the Blue Pine cabin. We all got out and stretched our legs, saying, You girls find it okay? Amelia gave him a handshake. Yeah, no trouble at all. Thanks again for letting us stay. Oh, it's no trouble, Franklin replied. He glanced at each of us for a while longer than was necessary before saying, I live in the guest cabin behind you. Won't be in your way at all. But if you need anything, firewood, more towels, or recommendations, don't hesitate to holler. That didn't sit well with me. The cabin's interior was stunning. 3 comfortable bedrooms upstairs, a kitchen with copper fixtures, exposed beams, and a large stone fireplace. It felt like home because of a few small details. A record player with a stack of vintage vinyls, lemon-scented candles, and plush throw blankets on the couches. At the dining table, we prepared pasta, drank wine, and played card games. It seemed like the kind of night that leaves everything else behind. Rent, work, and deadlines. At midnight, we all fell apart. The room nearest the stairs was the one I chose. I went out onto the porch to breathe before I went to bed. I spotted Franklin at that point, With a flashlight in hand, he was making his unhurried way from his cabin into the woods. Looking at the trees, I hid behind the doorway and observed. Perhaps he was only making sure of something. Perhaps nothing. We hiked a small route nearby and prepared breakfast in the morning. Franklin was not present. We thought he was in his cabin working on something or conducting errands. Nobody knocked on the front door until that night after supper, when we were in the middle of a drinking game. Jess leapt. I glanced through the peephole and thought, who the hell? Franklin was standing there with a little basket in his hand. I said, hey, and partially opened the door. He grinned. I just wanted to say hello. Local jerky, trail mix, and homemade cookies are some goodies I thought you girls might enjoy. Oh, I answered. Thanks, but we're good. You sure? His smile remained unwavering. You are very kind, but we just ate. I made an effort to be courteous. He gave a nod, raised the basket, as though to present it once more, and then walked slowly back to his cabin. I locked the door after closing it. As I asked the room, that was weird, right? Extremely, said Lauren very quietly. We attempted to act as though it hadn't been odd and said, why would he bring snacks at 10 p.m? We were fools as we danced around while Kat played music. For a short while, it was helpful. Jess froze in the middle of laughing. We all fell still, asking, wait, did someone just walk by the porch window? Amelia murmured, what? I saw a shadow, I swear. I opened the front door after grabbing a flashlight. There was nobody on the porch. Only the humming of cicadas in the trees could be heard. I said nothing, but my heart pounded. We heard slow, methodical footsteps going across the porch boards. Less than an hour later, we put out the lights. A silhouette emerged from the shadows, partially hidden by a wooden beam, just outside the window. Franklin was observing. He didn't bring any snacks this time, so I muttered, he's out there again. He knocked once, then more forcefully. I took an inch to open the door. What's happening? He said. I heard something. It sounded like yelling. We didn't yell. Are you certain? His voice had changed. Flat, I said, shoving the door shut. We're fine. I pressed the lock button. Franklin, good night. He did not immediately leave. Through the gap in the curtain, I observed his shadow lingering. We had a restless night. We were tense with every creak and wind blow. I went to the living room after waking up early. The windows were slanted with sunlight. I noticed it as I sat on the couch and rubbed my eyes. The bookshelf gave off a gentle metallic sheen. I leaned in. A camera, a little black lens. I summoned the others. As we dismantled the cabin, we discovered more in the bedroom. One in the kitchen clock, one in the bathroom vent, and one in the bedroom disguised as a decorative hanger. All of us stood trembling. He has been observing us, Kat muttered. We arrived, Jess said. Panic brewing beneath the surface. We packed in silence. We didn't care about checkout procedures, but we left everything tidy. We didn't go up against him. We had no desire to. Engine going, baggage in the Jeep, keys on the counter. I noticed him observing us from his porch as we retreated. He simply stared without smiling or waving. When we had cell service, I informed Airbnb of everything. Screenshots, camera images, and precise timestamps. Under a throwaway account, I left a thorough evaluation. They never responded to us, but the listing vanished a few weeks later. I occasionally ponder the number of people he observed or whether he ever kept the cameras operating even when no one was renting. Living on the outskirts of tiny towns has always appealed to me. The kind where you can ignore bothersome neighbors and heavy traffic while yet being officially a part of the community. My husband Noah and I moved to Maple Hollow, North Carolina. For that reason, we needed room, privacy, and a calm place after living in noisy apartment buildings for years. We discovered this quaint little home on the outskirts of a wooded area. It was one of those half-acre homes that already had a garden bed and a wraparound porch. It was flawless. It truly seemed like a new chapter when we bought it 3 summers ago. But nobody brought up the Airbnb next door. After we moved in, the house was vacant for several months. Individual from out of state then purchased it and turned it into a short-term rental property over a year ago. We didn't mind at first. Most of the visitors were peaceful, polite families or couples on the road. While some waved, others did not. Some even said hello over the fence or offered us leftover baked pastries. Then there was that late September weekend. The day had been warm, one of those infrequently occurring golden hours before the official start of fall. After supper, Noah and I settled into the living room while a documentary waited for us on the television. I recalled that the windows were open because the air outside smelt delicious and earthy, and the candle burning on the coffee table made the house smell like cinnamon. Approximately 8:45 p.m. I stopped and looked out the window of the living room. Two young people, perhaps in their mid-20s, were erecting something on the grass in the Airbnb's backyard. When I initially observed what they were doing, I assumed they were simply lighting citronella candles or unpacking a picnic. Yes, there were candles, but they were set up on the grass in an odd geometric design, such as a star or a circle. From our angle, I couldn't tell for sure. The tall, dark-haired woman was setting down what appeared to be tiny bones or feathers. The man was wearing trousers, no shirt, and scruffy blonde hair. He was using what appeared to be chalk or perhaps a flower to sketch something in the grass. I nudged Noah's arm and said, "Baby." He leaned forward and squinted. "Look at this. Why on earth are they doing this?" "A ritual of some sort," I murmured. "I suppose. Strange pastime, but whatever." Noah laughed uneasily. "As long as they don't burn anything." We continued to watch for a few more minutes, in part because I found it fascinating and in part because it made me itch. After a while, they simply sat facing each other, cross-legged, inside their candle circle. Although unnerving, it wasn't particularly dangerous, so we let it go. We turned on the television and became engrossed in the program. Around 11:30, as we went to bed, I took another look out the bedroom window. Only feeble candlelight was still glowing in the Airbnb's backyard. The pair was still seated there, sleepily. Noah asked, "Still at it?" "Yes. There are some spiritualists next door, I suppose. Better than intoxicated people rolling over," he said. I got into bed after agreeing. I awoke to a low, rhythmic, repeating mumbling. It wasn't a dream. Although I was still partly asleep, I was conscious. Your heart is already beating too quickly when you wake up, as if your brain is trying to alert you before you realize why. I took a seat. The bedroom window was open, and the murmurs were coming from outside. "Noah," I shook him and whispered. He moaned, but he sat up and rubbed his eyes. "Listen." Then both of us froze. Outside, someone was chanting and whispering no. Not in the yard of the Airbnb. Nearer. Our backyard. I went to the window. Our lawn was covered in long shadows due to the high moon. I noticed them at that point. Inside another ring of flickering candles, the identical couple from next door was standing in our lawn. But this one wasn't a circle. The grass in the center of the triangle had some sort of sign carved into it. Their hands were rising and falling in time with their words as they moved slowly in a dance-like rhythm. I took a breath. "Noah, we have them in our yard." He had already gotten out of bed and picked up his phone. I'm not sure why, but we didn't venture outside. Fear, perhaps. Perhaps it was instinct. We were warned not to get involved. We slipped to the back entrance instead and checked to make sure it was locked. Next, the others were examined. Every window and door has been double-checked and secured. They were still visible from the kitchen window, illuminated only by the brightness of the orange candles. Their looks were focused, emotionless, and unapproachable, not angry. Then I caught sight of something even odd. More lights, small pinpricks of firelight, resembling torches, or more candles set deep in the trees, were seen farther back in the woods beyond our land. Noah murmured, "They went into the woods." I had clammy hands. "Why are they at this place doing this?" He didn't respond. We remained up until the lights went out. The chanting ceased, and the backyard was once again deserted and dark. Their car was gone the following morning. The property over there was immaculate, as if nothing had happened, and the Airbnb driveway was deserted. We entered our yard with caution. Everything appeared to be in order. except for a message that was weighed down by a little stone in the center of the grass. There was no damage or proof. After staring at it for a while, I eventually knelt down. I unfurled the paper with trembling fingers. "Thanks for your participation. You have been seen," it said. That was it. You have been blessed. No name, no justification. At first, we kept it a secret. Would anyone trust us? There were only two strange visitors and a strange ceremony that permeated all property lines. There was no evidence, no cameras, and no pictures. However, it didn't stop there. We began to hear things throughout the course of the following few evenings. At precisely 3 a.m., there are gentle knocks on the rear fence, scratches inside the walls, and an odd buzzing coming from the open vents. We initially believed it to be our imagination. We repeatedly told ourselves that until we discovered something else. A week or so later, I went outside to get the mail one morning and froze. Another message was on our doormat. This one was typed, "Thank you for keeping quiet." That was it. What would we report if Noah decided to call the police? Strange notes, candles, and trespassing. However, we did get in touch with the Airbnb owner. I sent a kind message stating that the previous visitors had made us uncomfortable by entering our yard in the middle of the night. Within a few hours, he said, "I apologize deeply. I don't have any documentation of a reservation from the 23rd to the 25th. Are you certain they were staying at my house?" That's when I felt the worst. We bought motion lights and cameras, and we stopped sleeping with the windows open after we were certain we saw them park there, watched them set up, and went in and out of the Airbnb house. But apparently no one had reserved it that weekend. Nevertheless, I still feel the effects of whatever they did outside, whatever they invited, sometimes a shift in the stillness, like something watching when the sun goes down. And occasionally I wake up at 3 in the morning. I had never used Airbnb before. Hotels were always the safer, easier option. You knew what to expect. Front desk, cleaning staff, cameras in the hallways, locked lobby doors at night. This time, however, we were going for something a little more authentic. It was the beginning of April, just warming up after a bitter Michigan winter. There was no sound, no movement, just that feeling that the ritual never really ended. Like we're still inside the circle, and we were never supposed to see it. Originally, my friends and I, Rachel, Elise, Marcus, and Deandra, had planned to book a lakefront cabin through a local rental site, but last-minute cancellations and high prices narrowed our options. So Marcus found the Airbnb. It was a 2-story home just outside of town, tucked into a wooded stretch with no immediate neighbors, and it had 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a cozy kitchen, and a finished basement with a rec room. The pictures looked clean, the price was low, and most importantly, we believed no shared space with the host. We arrived on a Thursday afternoon. There was a stone fireplace in the living room, a small patio out back, and lots of homey touches, like quilted pillows, a bowl of wrapped candy on the counter, and even a coat rack by the door. The house was nice, not just Airbnb nice, but genuinely cozy. The key was in a lockbox, just like the host, Greg, who we'd never spoken to directly, only exchanged a few texts with. The tone was polite, maybe a bit clipped. "Full access to the house," he wrote. "No need to interact, just enjoy the space." That was fine with us. We were looking forward to turning off our brains for a few days. It wasn't until later that evening that things started to feel off. Ally, the first one to mention it. "Is it weird that there's like stuff still here?" she replied, opening a kitchen drawer. Checkbooks, some money, a small Ziploc bag with change, and other personal items were found inside. I gave a shrug. Perhaps when it's not rented. He lives here. From the living room, Rachel added her voice. "The TV in here is connected to a PlayStation 5. I assumed that folks brought their gadgets along." More details were apparent to us. Greg Holloway's name is written on bottled pills in the bathroom drawer, shoes in the hall closet, and the car key on the counter. "You do not believe that he is still residing here?" Marcus laughed thinly as he joked. "We have the entire place," Deandra remarked. "Perhaps he simply doesn't give a damn. Has faith in others." The padlock on the basement door was not explained by that. That night, we didn't give it any thought. We picked rooms, played cards, prepared pasta, and watched a silly horror film. I chose the one with the window looking out over the driveway, which was at the top of the steps. I couldn't sleep. It was more than mere unfamiliarity. The creaking was the cause. Yes, old houses always make noise, but this one seemed to be letting out a breath. Pipes knocked, and floorboards popped. I swear I heard the front door rattle once, but it was locked when I went to urinate. Eventually, about 2 o'clock, I fell asleep. 3:47 a.m. I had to urinate when I woke up. My bladder wouldn't let me go, so I lay there for a minute, staring at the black ceiling, hoping the feeling would go away. I shuffled toward the hallway after swinging my legs over the bed. I heard it at that point. A rustle, soft footsteps on carpet. With my hand on my doorknob, I paused. One of the others might have been awake. Rachel's bladder was tiny. Elise occasionally experienced sleeplessness. Silently, I opened the door. Only the dull blue light from the nightlight near the stairs illuminated the dreary corridor, and there was a stocky, male figure near Elise's door at the far end of the corridor, dressed in what appeared to be a hoodie. I went cold. At first, he didn't notice me. He was in a little crouch, checking Elise's doorknob with his hand. I was immobile. I was having trouble breathing. My body felt as though it had closed up. His head then turned, and our gazes met. He appeared captured, rather than frightened or irritated. I didn't think before reacting. I gave the light switch next to me a slap. In a quick, frigid glare, the lights in the hallway blinked on. I yelled, "Hey, what the fuck?" Behind me, doors crashed open. Deandra, Rachel, and Marcus are all shouting over one another. Elise's door opened as well, and she let out a scream upon seeing the man standing just a few steps away. With a yell, "Wait, wait," the man retreated. "I'm Greg. I'm the host," Marcus yelled, leaping forward. "What are you doing in the house?" The fog. Greg's hands went up. I assumed I could just retrieve the tools I left downstairs because I needed them for work tomorrow. Deandra yelled. At 4 o'clock in the morning, Greg was now sweating and appeared scared. He was barefoot. He was still shouting over each other when we heard him downstairs. At that moment, Rachel saw that the basement door's padlock was open. She questioned, "You were down there?" "When I'm not renting the upstairs, I just sleep there. It's my house," he blurted out, his voice trembling. I recall having a deep, icy uneasiness in my chest, like if my ribs were hollow, and saying, "I wasn't going to bother anyone. I thought you'd be asleep." He had spent the entire time inside the house. Well, Rachel contacted the local non-emergency police line and Marcus called Airbnb help. We made him sit on the couch. Greg made no attempt to flee. After a while, an officer emerged. We filled him in on everything. After listening and taking statements, the police officer drew Greg aside for a private discussion in the kitchen. It was complicated legally. Although Greg did own the house, it was made plain in his listing that visitors would have sole access while they were there. It was never mentioned that he would be residing in the basement. For the remainder of our visit, the officer urged Greg to depart. He simply brought a duffel bag. After that, we didn't get much sleep. We packed things early the following day and headed out. In the car, Elise sobbed. I reported it to Airbnb. The others did the same. A few days later, his listing was removed. He was banned from the platform. However, I'm not sure if he actually suffered any legal repercussions. Later, we made jokes about it. Greg the Basement Goblin, or Airbnb with perks. However, none of us actually chuckled. Not really. Since then, I haven't used Airbnb, because you never know who might be there, regardless of how tidy the home appears, how affordable it is, or how amiable the host seems over text. I needed some time away from the city. The past few months at work had been quite demanding. In all honesty, I was burning out due to the mounting deadlines, incessant calls, and ceaseless noise. Aaron, my companion, could tell. about 4 hours from our home in St. Louis. She discovered this small cabin on Airbnb, nestled in the hills close to Huron Ridge, a small village. It had the ideal appearance. There are only big trees, meandering dirt roads, stars, and no city lights or too close neighbors. Countless stars. The listing featured a wooden deck, a tiny fire pit outdoors, a yard that backed up to a pine forest slope, and a rustic appeal. Erin reserved it for the weekend without even consulting me. And the host, Julia, received excellent evaluations, with comments like just what we needed and felt like home, like a lifeline. You just sent me the confirmation. We brought light, Erin's telescope, a couple bottles of wine, munchies, and a few changes of clothes. She liked to look at the stars. To be honest, I enjoyed watching her more than the sky. We got there late on Friday afternoon. The smell of soil and moist leaves filled the air. As we drove up the gravel walk to the house, the driveway crunched beneath our tires. As stated in the listing, a key was in a lockbox waiting for us. No meet and greet, no check-in. That's nice. I was surprised by how wonderful the place was. Simple, comfortable, and clean. The living room had a large window that overlooked the yard and the forest slope beyond. We swiftly unpacked, lighted a few candles, and the wine was opened. Erin stroked my back and whispered, "This is just what you needed." I gave a nod. It's quiet, indeed, as in, really silent. 9:00 p.m. We grabbed a few blankets and the wine before making our way to the rear deck. The sky was clear, darker than anything you would see in your native country, like a layer of powdered sugar. The Milky Way spanned the sky. We spent hours discussing work, moving to a quieter area, and nothing else. It had been months since I felt so rooted. Eventually, I caught a glimpse of light glimmering through the trees to our right. Maybe 50 or 60 feet away, a little downward, is a nearby house. When we got there, we hadn't noticed it. The yards were separated by dense bush. There were no fences. Look, I nudged Erin while whispering. At the house next door, a porch light blinked on. A guy emerged, initially only a silhouette. He moved to his yard's border and remained motionless. There was no leash, no barking, nothing. So I assumed he was letting a dog out or something. He was the only one standing there, holding his phone. Then I noticed it. He raised his phone, pointing toward us rather than his face, as the screen came to life. Is he filming? Her voice was hardly more than a whisper when Erin inquired. The angle was correct, but I couldn't be certain. He held his phone steady, like he was filming. He was also not moving. I moved the blanket away from my lap and carefully stood up, continuing to stare at him. Trying not to panic, I said, "Let's head inside." Erin didn't argue. We gathered our belongings, entered through the sliding glass door, and closed it after ourselves. When I peeked out from the living room again, he was still there, either observing or filming. No flashlight, just the glow of his screen, so it was difficult to tell. Erin tried to dismiss it, saying that perhaps he was just checking his reception or something. I shook my head, but she had no response. So we closed the curtains and tried to ignore it while making popcorn. Before going to bed at around midnight, I watched half of a movie. I awoke to an unidentified sound. It rustled softly beneath your feet, like leaves, but not loudly. Erin was sleeping next to me, with her face partially hidden in the pillow. Silently, I got out of bed and padded to the window. The curtain was flimsy, and everything looked faintly blue in the moonlight outside. He was in our yard, closer this time. In an attempt to process, I blinked twice. We hadn't switched on the yard light, and he was standing by the tree iron, just out of reach. He was observing with his hands by his sides, no longer clutching a phone. Erin wasn't ready for me to wake him up yet. Perhaps I was dreaming. Upon arriving in the living room, I switched on the lamp next to the couch. Something minor but noticeable. He was gone by the time I got back to the window. Lost, with my heart racing, I leaned closer to the glass. Then, as if he had sneaked back to his house as soon as the lights came on, I noticed movement and his door closing next door. I watched for a further hour, while still sitting on the couch with the lamp on, but nothing more occurred. We argued over what to do the following morning. Erin responded, "Let's just go about our day. In any case, we're going tomorrow." We visited a small antique shop, had lunch in town, and hiked some of the neighboring trails. I forgot about the previous evening for a time. The sun was already setting when we got back to the cabin. This time the sky was cloudy. There are no stars to see. Going outside wasn't even something I recommended. Erin didn't either. By 10:30, we had eaten leftovers, watched a movie, and snuggled into bed. Then the footsteps appeared, slow and purposeful, like someone sneaking rather than jogging or walking their dog. I immediately sat up. Erin shifted. "What is it?" she muttered. I tiptoed to the window and put a finger to my lips. This time, he was directly against the cabin's side, and the little porch light we had left on was able to see his shadow as it extended across the deck. He moved in the direction of the living room's side window. We hadn't completely pulled the curtain. I didn't think twice. Reaching for my phone, I dialed 911. The dispatcher cupped his hands against the glass and leaned forward to look in, while I whispered to him. When I said, "He's looking inside," the dispatcher informed me that officers were en route, but that it might take some time, because the area was remote. "I don't know him. He's a neighbor here, but he's been doing this 2 nights in a row." At that moment, he looked toward the light coming from our bedroom window. With my heart pounding so rapidly that I felt lightheaded, I ducked quickly. I took another look a few minutes later. He had left. About 20 minutes later, he was back in his own home when the sheriff's deputy showed up. We gave them an explanation, pointed out the direction he had come from, and even indicated the phone he had pointed at the previous evening. No one replied when the deputy knocked on the neighbor's door. He answered, "We'll make a note of it." Not quite consoling, but let the property owner know and keep your phones close tonight just in case. We didn't get much sleep. Erin called Julia, the Airbnb host, the following morning and filled her in on everything. She appeared astonished and contrite. "This is the most unusual complaint I've ever received," she said. "I'm so sorry. I find that to be unsettling. I'll personally get in touch with the neighbor." We got on the road early and packed quickly. If that man ever bothered another guest, I don't know. I sent Julia a thorough private letter via Airbnb and a review that just alluded to security issues without providing any details. Not enough to be flagged, but enough to warn. I still occasionally consider it. How, upon seeing him, he did not recoil. How he drew nearer on the second evening. How he simply stared without speaking, grinning, or making any gestures. It opened my eyes to the fact that we are susceptible even in the most peaceful settings, and how a weekend that was supposed to be spent away from the commotion turned into a silent nightmare. At first, I didn't think much of the place. 4 months, we had been in need of a vacation. My wife and I were exhausted from work, and the children had been restless and indoors constantly since school ended. We seized the opportunity when my cousin Marlin informed me about a peaceful Airbnb that he and his spouse had stayed at in a little upstate hamlet. The house was located approximately 3 hours' drive from our Durham home in the village of Whisper Pines. It was just far enough away from the bustle of the city to make you feel as though you had left it behind. Family-friendly retreat with large backyard and treehouse, said the Airbnb listing. The photos showed a charming small cottage with a wraparound porch and pine trees all around, and the kids were immediately drawn to the treehouse. Rachel, my wife, was initially dubious, although it was only for a weekend and the evaluations were very positive. She doesn't enjoy staying in strangers' houses. The pictures alone had our 6-year-old Sophie and 7-year-old Eli hopping with excitement. We arrived late in the afternoon after packing on Friday morning. When we arrived, there was a breeze rattling through the pine needles and some cloud cover. On the kitchen counter was a handwritten message from the owner. "Greetings, family of Evan, Sakasa, played by Mikasa. You are welcome to use the board games in the closet. Have fun with the swing set and remember to write a review." As promised, the key had been in a lockbox. Together, we strolled around the house while allowing the children to explore. The atmosphere felt cozy rather than ostentatious. Wood-paneled walls, creaking floorboards, and an old-fashioned couch that sucked you in when you sat on it. There was a little scent underneath, like lemon cleaner. Mothballs, perhaps. We cooked popcorn and watched a movie together after unloading. After the kids went to bed, Rachel and I sat up and chatted while opening a bottle of wine. We didn't decide to call it a night until about midnight. It felt natural, even pleasant, that first day. But about 1:30 a.m., I was awakened by something. There was only muttering, not a smash or a bang, like to people whispering behind a wall. It was drawn out and gentle. Bewildered, I sat up in bed, with one arm covering her face. Rachel was fast asleep. I listened with strain, like it had never been there. The sound vanished. Whined. I mumbled to myself, probably. The house was sealed and the windows were closed. I lay back down, telling myself it was nothing. For the remainder of the night, I had trouble sleeping. The children were out and about before us the following morning. By the tree house, I discovered them. Dad, it has a rope ladder. Eli burst out. Sophie was swinging softly close by, holding her stuffed llama in her lap, saying, "It's so cool." I saw that the wood appeared grayed out, as if it had not been restored or tinted for many years. Every movement caused the swing chains to creak. One of the tree house's shutters was hanging crookedly, and the paint was peeling. Nothing urgent, but a touch risky. Before going in to assist Rachel in preparing breakfast, I warned them to exercise caution and keep an eye on them for a bit. She appeared worn out. I said, "Did you sleep okay?" She paused before responding. "Yeah, I believe I just had a strange dream." "What was it?" "I'm not sure." We explored the town that afternoon, and Whisper Pines was small, with 2 diners, a gas station, and a strip of local shops. It had that sleepy southern vibe, and people waved from their porches. At a small coffee shop, we got hot chocolate for the kids, and iced coffee for us. I thought I heard someone calling my name, but I must have been half asleep. I almost told her about the whispering, but decided against it because I didn't want to start the trip off on a spooky note. One of the baristas, a woman who was perhaps in her 50s, overheard Rachel mention the Airbnb. "Do you guys intend to remain at the Pinera house? That place is still listed," she added. Yeah, that's the one," Rachel said. The woman's smile wavered. "I stayed there once," the woman added, "years ago," and we looked at each other. Back then, things were different. Continued to hear noises at night. I felt like I was going crazy. She gave an unsteady laugh. "Anyway, have a great weekend, everyone." Probably nothing. The children were urging us to get out. I tried not to give the talk too much thought, but I did make a mental note of it. Probably local rumors. We took an old board game out of the hall closet and set it up in the living room. That evening after supper, the overhead lights were flickering, so Rachel had lit a couple of candles. Everything felt light again after she joked that we were playing by candlelight. Sophie squealed with glee as she defeated us all at the game. But then I noticed that the front door was cracked wide. "Did someone open the door?" "No. I locked it earlier," I said. And Rachel scowled. I checked again. I walked over and closed it. I turned the deadbolt and made sure it latched this time. My skin still pricked. Perhaps one of the children had tampered with it. Perhaps not. The lights began to flicker once more fiercely. Some 20 minutes later. Then there was no power at all. Rachel responded, "Okay, that's not funny," and got to her feet. "I didn't do anything," I responded, reaching for a flashlight on my phone. I checked the fuse box in the kitchen, but everything appeared to be in order. The electricity was restored after a minute or 2. Rachel was surrounded by a group of wide-eyed children, whispering. "I want to go home," Sophie said. "You're all right, my love," Rachel reassured her. "Just an old house," although her voice wasn't entirely steady. 9:00 p.m. Eli ran inside and started crying. He had a pale face. I knelt down and asked, "What happened?" "I noticed someone," he sobbed. "He was sitting there in the treehouse, staring at me, whispering comfort, Rachel drew him into an embrace. With my heart racing, I dashed outdoors. Still swaying, the swing set was deserted. The treehouse remained silent and dark inside. Armed with a flashlight, I climbed the ladder. Nothing. An old beanbag in one corner, cobwebs in others. No one in sight. Once we went inside, I told Rachel that he was merely dreaming. Shadows, perhaps, probably, but my voice died off as I was saying it. Rachel glanced at me across the candlelit table that evening after we had put the children to bed. This place bothers me. Slowly, I nodded. I also don't. Around 2 a.m. I awoke once more. It wasn't whispering this time. It was footsteps. The corridor outside our bedroom had slow, clear steps. I didn't breathe. They came to a halt at the door of the bedroom. I sat up, gasping for air. The door remained closed. Silently, I stood up and opened it. The hallway is deserted. The entire house was silent, but I could see it as I approached the living room. Once more, the entrance door was wide open. I was still, curling into the house at night. I inspected the yard and porch, but nothing was there. I jammed a chair against the door and locked it once again. I never slept again. I told Rachel everything the following morning. She only gave me a blank stare. She said in the corridor last night, I saw someone, too. It was only a figure, yet it was observing me. She hesitated. I also didn't open the front door. We avoided discussing it with the children. We informed them that due to a change in plans, we would be leaving early for home. They didn't challenge it. Sophie exclaimed. She's still sitting there as we loaded the car, turning back to see the swing set. I slowly turned. There was nobody there, but the swing swayed once, softly. That afternoon, we took a car back home. I felt as like a weight was being lifted off my chest as we approached Durham. I'm not sure what's wrong with that Whisper Pines mansion. It's not simply local rumors anymore, in my opinion. Perhaps years ago, something happened there. Perhaps the house simply remembers. No review has been left by me, nor do I believe I ever will. I should have just kept driving. Looking back, I had planned a week-long vacation months in advance, and I was traveling alone through northern Arizona, working my way up from Tucson to Sedona. After a particularly terrible burnout and the split that followed, I recently resigned my job at a dentist clinic. To be honest, I simply needed room. The idea was to make a one-night break in the middle, recuperate, and then head to my main Airbnb the following afternoon. I ultimately reserved a modest 2-bedroom rental for a community outside of Prescott as a result. The listing featured a tidy, modest home with keypad entry, security cameras outside, and adequate lighting. It also received good reviews. There was nothing luminous, but nothing concerning either. Additionally, I felt more at peace because the host, Rick, answered my mails promptly. At approximately 7:45 p.m., I pulled up. Even though it was early spring, there was a hint of cold in the air, and some stars had already started to appear in the sky, except for a dog barking down the street and the distant hum of ATV coming from someone's open window. The street was silent. The location resembled the pictures exactly. A short path with gravel landscaping on either side, red tile roofing, and tan stucco walls. I entered a pristine living room, using the code Rick texted me to unlock the front door. Something warm, possibly a cinnamon plugin, and a hint of lemon cleanser were the scents it carried. Out of habit, I left my luggage at the door and proceeded to inspect every room in the home. There are 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen, and a comfortable couch that faces a television mounted on the wall. Simple but tidy and well maintained. I quickly texted my sister to inform her that I had arrived. She smiled and remarked, "Girl, that looks like something from HGTV. That looks like something from HGTV. You going to watch trash TV and eat ice cream? You know me too well," I chuckled. After a few minutes, we hung up, and I placed an order for pizza from a local restaurant. By 8:30, it had arrived. While watching 90 Day Fiancé, I consumed half of it on the couch and then stored the remaining portion in the refrigerator. I was already starting to feel drowsy by 9:15. Early crash and departure by mid-morning were the plans. The doorbell rang at that moment. The chime wasn't ding-dong. I flinched at the sound of one of those awful mechanical buzzes. Bewildered, I slowly sat up. I had no expectations. There was no mention of housekeepers or the owner dropping by when I checked in on Airbnb. I thought it may be an error, though. Perhaps a delivery person. I approached the door without opening it. I said, "Hello," over the woods. A pause was followed by the solid, quiet voice of a guy. "Yeah, hi. We're here for the Airbnb. Can you open up?" I missed it. I remained behind the door and asked, "What do you mean?" A second, gentler, almost amused voice said, "I'm staying here tonight. We have the reservation now. You must be confused. Something didn't feel right." My heart thumped. "No, I have the listing in my app," I said. That set off a primordial alert in me. "You need to call the host. Come on, just open the door. We'll sort it out inside." "No," I yelled. "I'm calling the owner." I was 5 feet 3 inches in alone myself and most definitely wasn't opening that door. "Please move aside." One pair of footsteps left the porch, but the other man remained. I glanced through the peephole, but it only revealed a portion of the porch, and then there was silence once more. One man was standing off to the left, facing away toward the driveway, staring at a dark SUV parked there with its engine running. I had a gut feeling that this wasn't a reservation or a misunderstanding, but then I saw movement in the shadows. There were more figures farther down the driveway, behind the fence line, 5 or 6 people, standing still, watching. I was unable to see details because they were all wearing bandanas, hoodies, or other coverings over their faces. A lump formed in my throat, so I backed away from the door, turned, and walked quickly and quietly to the hallway, grabbing my phone from the guest bedroom nightstand, ducking into the bathroom, and locking the door behind me. "What's your emergency?" a woman asked. "There are males outside claiming to have a reservation, but more of them are hidden in the driveway, wearing masks, and I believe they are attempting to break in." "All right, ma'am. I need you to remain composed." "Are you alone?" "I'm at an Airbnb in the Prescott Valley," and I gave the address in one breath. I muttered, "Yes, stay in a locked room. Officers are on their way. Do not engage. Stay on the line." I sat on the chilly tile floor with my phone to my ear, my heart pounding so rapidly that I thought it might reverberate through the walls, when I heard movement outside the house, footsteps, the crunch of gravel, the slamming of a car door, and then silence until it wasn't. "Ma'am," the dispatcher began. "Are you okay?" The wooden groan of strain, like weight being driven against the front door, then crack. They were inside. I put my palm over my lips to stifle the sob that escaped. I said, "They're in the house. They broke in." I heard cabinet doors banging open and their racing footsteps. There's another voice saying, "Check the back." I huddled closer in the bathroom corner, my palm still clamped over my lips, asking, "Where is she?" Now my phone was mute. The last thing I wanted was for them to hear. Footsteps approached. A hand on the bathroom door, followed by the hallway and bedroom. A man whispered, "Locked," then spoke louder. "There is nothing here." I stared at the bottom of the door as if it could burst open, sitting still and breathing shallowly. Then, after what seemed like an age, there were sirens close, clear, and real. The doors slammed. The thumping of feet rushed out the back as people yelled. Then silence once more. This time, there was a gentle voice after the knock on the bathroom door. "This is Prescott Valley Police Department Officer Daniels. Miss, are you all right?" I completely broke down at that point. My suppressed tears burst out. Minutes later, they discovered me still trembling on the ground. What happened next seemed unreal. The police verified that the house had been looted. My keys were taken, and my overnight bag was gone. They broke the glass of my car and entered the glove box, but they did not leave the car. An hour later, the Airbnb owner arrived, bewildered and contrite. He said that I was the only one who had made the reservation, and that nobody else should have the code. According to the police, the group probably investigated the neighborhood and looked through Airbnb listings to locate vacant or single-family homes. They claim to have been handling similar situations, groups that deceive homeowners or visitors by utilizing fictitious accounts or information that has been stolen. According to one cop, they don't usually harm individuals, but the danger is increasing. Locking yourself in and remaining silent was the correct thing for you to do. That night and the evenings that followed, I didn't sleep. Instead of staying at the second Airbnb, I drove directly to Sedona the following day and got into a hotel. Location with security, cameras, and the front desk. Since then, I haven't utilized Airbnb. Months later, I still make sure to look behind every door wherever I go. I still double-check windows and locks, and occasionally, I think I hear that doorbell again when the wind is blowing just right. Chilly, angular, and incorrect. Not every horror tale has a fatal conclusion. There are instances when they just leave you alive but haunted. I never imagined that I would own a second. Choosing a home would turn into the most difficult choice I've ever made as an adult. Initially, it was a wise investment. About a 20-minute drive from our home, my wife Emily and I had purchased a property just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. Nestled in the trees, this quaint 3-bedroom cabin was just far enough from the city center to be considered practical, yet remote enough to appeal to those who wished to escape from it all. Each of us worked a full-time job. She taught. I worked from home in IT. Therefore, it looked like a fantastic side business idea to convert the cabin into an Airbnb. The location was gorgeous, the market was bustling, and we had saved up enough cash to decorate it. And it was successful for the first 2 years. The rental calendar was nearly always full. We hired a local cleaning lady, and we seldom ever spoke to our guests beyond a few texts. We were earning twice as much as a long-term renter would have. We had options, even though it was more hands-on. We could reserve weekends for ourselves, and we weren't bound by a 1-year lease. But difficulties that you don't read about in Airbnb success blogs began to accompany achievement. On a Monday evening in early October, the true shift began. I was still sweating and warming leftovers when I logged off from work. Emily was in the adjacent room grading papers. It was midweek, and it had been a slow month, but we had a 1-night reservation at the cabin, which we typically avoided, because it meant hurrying to clean and reset for the next visitor. Brian Keller was the name on the reservation. He stated that he was traveling from Charleston and wanted a peaceful evening before heading to Tennessee, so he reserved the house for just 1 night. His profile appeared to be rather typical. ID verified to 5-star reviews. Around midday, he sent a kind message stating that he will arrive at 4:30 p.m. along with the smart lock combination and fireplace instructions. I gave him the standard automatic welcome message. 4:50 p.m. received the typical text. Hey Brian, I just arrived. A lovely location. Once again, thank you. I gave a thumbs up in response. Just another night. No warning signs, no intuition. 9:07 p.m. phone buzzed once more. Brian, hey, may I give you a quick call? A knot formed in my stomach. The majority didn't call. They texted in case something went wrong. Managing messages and forwarding them as necessary was simple. However, his number appeared on my phone before I could respond. With a sigh, I put down my glass and responded. Hello. Hey, yeah, sorry to bother you, Brian replied. He spoke in a soothing tone. A bit too serene, perhaps. Only the water is involved. It isn't functioning. I tried both the bathroom and kitchen faucets, but nothing came out. I blinked. No pressure at all is disliked by any of the taps. Yes, bone dry. There was no sense in that. We had never experienced plumbing problems before. I apologized and promised to stop by and have a look. I'd be done in 20 minutes. Without hesitation, he agreed. Not a problem, he said. I appreciate you staying on top of it. I grabbed my tool bag and flashlight just in case, and put on jeans and a jacket. Emily glanced up from the table in the kitchen. Are you heading out right now? She inquired. She scowled. Yeah, guest says the water's not working. That's strange. I understand. Usually, the drive to the cabin was quiet. I'll be back soon. but the road felt too quiet that night. I'll be back soon. But the road felt too quiet that night. Headlights bouncing off pine trunks. Just me navigating dark mountain curves. The air smelled damp and cold. Early warning indications of frost. The two cars were the first thing I saw when I drew into the gravel driveway. A silver Ford automobile, similar to those found in rental lots, was one of them. The other was an old blue SUV that looked out of place parked close to the edge. I reduced my speed. Brian claimed to be by himself. No additional guests without permission was explicitly stated in Airbnb's policies. I mentally noted that I should bring it up in the follow-up evaluation. Nothing seemed strange, though. The light on the porch was on. No damage is apparent. I approached and knocked courteously before entering the combination for the smart lock. No response. I called Brian. "It's me, the proprietor, Matt. I'm just stopping by to inspect the plumbing." Nothing has changed. I entered. The residence had a subtle scent of cleaning products and cedar. Typical. The living room lights were on. Then, upstairs, I heard footsteps. I spoke louder. "I apologize for interrupting. I just wanted to investigate the water problem." Footsteps stopped. Then a figure began to descend the steps. A man who was most likely in his late 20s turned the corner. Clean-shaven, dark hair. He had a composed face and was dressed in pants and a long-sleeved black shirt. "You must be Matt," he remarked with a little smile. He nodded. "Yeah, Brian, right? Thanks for coming so late. I know it's a pain." "No problem," I replied. He looked toward the kitchen and replied, "Yeah, so, you said the water's not working. Just went off a little after we were comfortable," which was strange. A second mug was on the coffee table, and a scarf was thrown over one of the chairs. I asked casually, "Is there anyone else with you?" Brian shrugged vaguely. "My girlfriend had come over for dinner, but she had simply left, leaving the blue SUV parked outside." "You got it?" I asked slowly as I entered the kitchen. I turned the faucet, but there was no sound or pressure. Out of habit, I then clicked the garbage disposal button, but it didn't hum, and there was no electricity. I turned to face him and asked, "Did you check the breaker box?" He was perplexed. "The what?" I didn't trust him. "Would it be okay if I checked it quickly?" I said, already making my way to the utility closet by the back hallway. "Yeah, that's too fast." I opened the door, and the panel appeared to be in good condition, with all the switches in their proper locations. I turned the main switch on and off, but nothing changed. Then I heard a thud coming from above, and I turned to ask, "Are you sure you're here alone?" Brian blinked. "Yes." I didn't respond. He didn't stop me. The hallway upstairs was dimly lit, with only one room having a light on. As I approached, I noticed that the door was slightly ajar. The master bedroom was empty, but the closet door was closed, and I knew that I had left it open after the last cleaning. I took a step closer, my heart racing, and then stopped when Brian called up behind me. "Everything okay?" I answered, "Just checking something." My hand went to the closet knob, and I quickly opened it, finding it empty. My heart finally slowed. Perhaps I was exaggerating. Perhaps the girlfriend had left the second car on foot, or with someone else. Perhaps the power outage was an isolated incident. But then I noticed something in the closet corner. Women's boots. A second pair, still warm. I went out into the hall and called down, "Hey, could you come here for a moment?" Brian didn't respond, so I hurried downstairs. I contacted Emily right away and said, "Lock the doors." His SUV and car were still in the driveway, but he was gone, and the front door was wide open. "Don't let anyone in. In the event that something strange occurs, call the police." "What's the matter?" "I don't know yet," I answered, getting into my truck, in response to her anxious question. "But I believe someone just used our Airbnb for something they weren't supposed to." The following day, I informed Airbnb of the entire situation, providing them with the phone log, all of the texts, and even a screenshot of the guest's profile. The profile turned out to be fraudulent. The identity had been taken. 2 days later, the payment bounced. He dialed a disconnected number. What they were doing there and who they were never revealed to us. However, a week later, the housekeeper discovered a knife purposefully concealed deep within the master bed's mattress. The last visitor we ever had was that one. 6 months after we sold the cabin, I made sure to check the latch on our front door 3 times before going to bed. It began as a straightforward favor. That weekend, I wasn't even expected to be in town. A few months prior, my sister Kayla and her husband Mark had put their second home up for sale on Airbnb. It was a small 2-bedroom home located just outside of Flagstaff, Arizona, in a peaceful neighborhood, the type of location that tourists enjoyed. Comfortable, tidy, reasonably priced, and sufficiently removed from the city to be serene. Around 9 o'clock at night, I returned home to Phoenix while they were on vacation in Hawaii. On a Friday evening, I received a text from Kayla asking if I could quickly help her. "Can you come over to the house tomorrow? Kayla, there is no running water, according to the present visitors." Me, really? Isn't that what a plumber does? Kayla, the person we phoned won't be able to arrive until Monday. All I ask is that you see if the valve was bumped or something. Please. I let out a sigh. It wasn't the best. I owed her, but it was a 3-hour drive to check on some plumbing. She supported me during my time in college and allowed me to stay on her couch for almost a year following my split. I agreed, prepared an emergency overnight bag, and made plans to depart early the following day. Background: I had previously stayed at the house shortly after they purchased it. There is nothing strange about the location. Friendly neighbors, a fenced-in yard, and a quiet area. Most of the people on the street were pensioners, with the odd out-of-towner. There has never been an issue with the water, even though Mark had just installed brand new plumbing 6 months prior, and Kayla was very careful about maintaining everything. I couldn't get rid of the strange feeling I had while driving. I couldn't stop wondering who would intentionally shut off a water valve, and why. Around 12:30 the following afternoon, I arrived at the residence. The mid-90s was hotter than anticipated, and there were no clouds in the sky. Something strange caught my attention as I came up to the gravel driveway. There are no cars in front. A couple, possibly in their 20s, were expected to be among the visitors staying there. According to Kayla, they had reserved tonight's and were scheduled to depart on Sunday. However, the driveway was deserted, the curtains were drawn, and the building appeared nearly deserted. Nevertheless, as a precaution, I parked, took the extra key from the lockbox, and knocked first. No response. I went inside after unlocking the door. "Hi there, is anyone present?" I yelled. Quiet. The living room was spotless. It was lived in, not a hotel room. There are some mugs in the sink. There are no individuals, just a duffel bag hanging by the hallway entrance. "All right," I whispered. "Already, this is strange." I started by going to the basement to look at the water valve. A utility closet was located in the back corner of the house's full basement. I became aware of how silent it was as I went down the groaning stairs. There was only this thick, muffled silence, no floorboards creaking overhead, no hum of appliances. I saw the valve on the far wall as I opened the utility door. It was securely twisted shut. I cautiously twisted it, and as soon as I did, I heard a whoosh in the distance. The pipes are rushing with water. Strange. The pipes are rushing with water. Strange. Why would somebody turn it off in that manner? Something gnawed at me as I stood there looking at it. Why couldn't we see the guests anywhere? Why claim that there is no water when the valve is fully closed? Then I recalled that Kayla had mentioned that the person who made the reservation had given her a call. He introduced himself as Ryan. It sounded average, young, and courteous, but anyone could say that. Anyone could use a stolen card and a phony name. After all, this was an Airbnb. I inhaled deeply before turning to go back upstairs. At that moment, footsteps were heard and the cellar door cracked open. They were sure, slow, hefty, and purposeful. Halfway up the stairs, I froze. Then 3 bearded males in their late 30s or early 40s appeared, all wearing jeans and hoodies. Tattoos were growing up the neck of one of them. The ones that weren't ornamental, the type that mentioned jail time. The lead man gave a small smile. He inquired, "Is it fixed?" The voice was instantly familiar to me. It was Ryan, who was older than the person who had called my sister. Furthermore, he certainly didn't appear to be a tourist. Yeah, I replied warily. The valve was simply closed. I cleared my throat and said, "I'll go out now. Let me know if you need anything else." They all just stared at me, with no expression, no nods, and no thanks. I tried to move past them, but as I did, I saw a gun, a terrifying object tucked into the waistband of the man nearest the stairs. I didn't wait. "You're back early. What happened?" I told Kayla everything, from the silent house to the valve to the 3 men in the basement, and she went pale and said, "I'm calling the cops." I walked past them, climbed the rest of the stairs more quickly than I should have, and they didn't follow me, but they watched me. I left right out the front door, got into my car, and drove 2 blocks before I even blinked. She reported it as a possible break-in or squatting situation, and when the Flagstaff police arrived approximately 40 minutes later, they called her back. No one was home, the officer said, adding that the place appeared clean, the doors were locked, and there were no signs of forced entry. Kayla then gave them the code to the lockbox, and an hour later, she received another call, stating that it appeared the place had just been vacated. The worst part, though, is that the credit card used to make the reservation was reported stolen this morning. Kayla and Mark checked the house over the course of the following few days and discovered that a number of things were missing, including a $1,200 sound system, a number of antique vases, some electronics, and even the guest towels. They also discovered that there was no young couple, Ryan, or actual reservation, and that whoever those men were had used a stolen card to get in. They stayed long enough to inspect the property and might have been plotting something worse. But what really bothers me that they turned off the water intentionally to get me to come. That was the last time Kayla ever let someone stay there without meeting them first. And a few months later, she pulled the house off Airbnb completely and rented it out long-term instead. So now every time I pass a basement door, I hesitate. They must have known the owners were out of town. Possibly they looked up Kayla's social media and knew she was in Hawaii. And perhaps they wanted to rob me, scare me, or worse. I get queasy whenever I hear footsteps on stairs. And if someone assures me that it's probably nothing, I am reminded of those 3 men's faces and how they simply stood there, waiting.